Senior, your host, and this is Community Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an outstanding program this afternoon. We're talking with former attorney Alyce Neff Browne, and we're going to be talking about her career in the legal profession. And outstanding, she's an elite person, an exemplary person in Lake County. And good evening, Attorney Browne.
Yes, Dr. Brooks.
Thank you very much for taking time from your very busy schedule to be with us on Community Forum. Lake County is approximately grown quite a bit since you were started here. With about 750,000 people now. And we reach all of Lake County, and this program airs in Kenosha, Wisconsin, on Time Warner TV, and also CAN TV, also in Chicago. And of course, it's online, so people in Japan, Australia,
Very
and so
impressive.
forth. If you have not been known all over the world, you are now.
Amazing. Thank you.
So I want you to tell our listening audience a little bit about your personal and professional background.
Okay. Well, I was born in Clinton, Iowa, but I was raised in Moline, Illinois on a chicken farm. I went to college at 17 from there. I had 2 scholarships. Worked my way through college and law school at Champaign.
Okay.
And then I got married in 1960, and we moved to Chicago. My husband was an electrical engineer, and I finished at Northwestern School of Law on Chicago Avenue in Chicago. The Evanston campus is the main Northwestern, but the law school and med school is right there.
Right.
And transferred my 22.5 credits from there down to U of I, where my degree was. Then we lived in Chicago the first year. We bought a house in Palatine. I practiced 5 years in Chicago. I wrote textbooks and pension plan guides for CCH at first, and then I had my second daughter. I was pregnant when I took the Bar Association, the bar exam, and so on. And then I worked 3 years for Benefit Trust Life Insurance Company on Howard Street in Chicago. And then my husband got transferred to Milwaukee, so it was history after that. We all went to Milwaukee. I did foreclosures for Mortgage Associates for a year before I had to sit for the Wisconsin bar. I passed it the first time. Wisconsin attorneys never have to take it if they go to Marquette or UW in Madison. And then I practiced 5 years in Milwaukee. And when I got a divorce from my first husband, I just threw a dart at the map to come back to Illinois and hit Waukegan dead between Chicago and Milwaukee, and bought a house here and got married at Trinity AME on the south side on December 2nd, 1969. And we bought our house at 555 McAllister, where I hung my shingle out, Alyce Neff Browne, attorney at law, for the next 10 years. Raised our 2 boys there. They went to Happy Day Nursery. And I practiced at first largely in divorce work and occasional criminal trials, because I had had some criminal trials in Milwaukee. I worked for Sid Eisenberg for a year, and then Bob Beaudry in West Allis for another year up there. And then I went sole practitioner the latter 3 years. I was elected in 1968 as the first woman municipal justice of the peace in the state of Wisconsin, in Little Muskego, Wisconsin, and I had a little bitty gavel and a little bitty name thing, and I had Wednesday night court for traffic cases and city shoplifting, OV things. It was every Wednesday night. It was kind of interesting, that part of it. And then during the week, of course, I'd be in court every day.
Attorney Browne, you mentioned that you were raised on a chicken farm, but did you have any idea that you would become an attorney?
No, my father was a tool and die maker, master tool and die maker.
Okay. What kind of piqued your interest going to law?
Actually, I had I took business law, and this little short teacher, Arthur Crane, was a teacher, and I took it as a junior in high school when the first thing he said to the class is, there are two things we don't have in here, juniors and girls. And my girlfriend had decided to take it with me. So here we are sitting there with all these senior boys. She took it to get the boys. I took it to do the law. Okay. And then he graded, set the curve. So every single exam, I set the curve. I got A on every single one except one, and then I proved I was right and he was not right because it was a specific performance question. Certain kinds of tomatoes Campbell's Hoop has to have, and if they give something else, they violate the contract. Anyway, that is why I went to the University of Illinois and became a lawyer. He was my sheer inspiration.
I was worried about the glass ceiling, for women in the legal profession.
It was even worse then than in any time since, because when I get to the University of Illinois, well, I graduated and did the first 4 years, and first I was in math teacher training because my mother just insisted you better take something more realistic.
Okay.
So then I switched to pre-law as a junior.
Okay.
And when I get to law school, there are 4 women in all 4 years and 400 men. And every single class it was a challenge.
Now repeat that. 4 women.
Over all 3 years of law school, and 400 men.
400
yeah, they all knew
men.
me, but you can hardly know everybody. Each class was a big theatrical classroom, and of course the Socratic method. So and it's dog eat dog at University of Illinois. It's much harder than Northwestern.
Okay.
So, like, the dean's course was the second semester of the freshman year for constitutional law, and I sat in the front row because he reversed the alphabetical order. All the other classes do, and my maiden name was Tallman, so I'm usually in the back row. Tallman, Suggs, Tallman, Tepper. But this time we're in the front row, and he called on me every single day. He called on me and 2 others, and me and 2 others. And I shall never know why he picked on me, but I got one of the 3 A's he gave to 120 students.
Wow.
And then he gave out about a dozen B's and a big bell curve, a lot of C's, and then flunked the whole rest.
Wow.
That's how it was at U of
tough,
I,
yeah.
Tough. And the dean's course was the hardest.
Now, what particular phase of law did you practice? We're here in Waukegan.
By that time, I had quite a bit of criminal jury trial work in Milwaukee, but I just took what came. So I did a lot of divorce work, and it worked into doing a lot of pro bono work because many of my minority clients, of course, were impecunious. So I would charge them less, very much less, and then have them file a poor person's petition, and I wouldn't take a contested divorce. I would give them a legal pad, say, go to big boy, settle everything. If you can do that, and even the custody of the children and all your property, then I will help you get the divorce, because I didn't have time to go into the problems, nor could I do that on the amount I was quoting to them. So it worked out well. Bill Rosing was the recipient of most of my contested divorces because he was a year behind me in law school.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. There's, I guess, 2 major. There's the civil division, and then there's the prosecutors, civil, and the other division of law.
Right, equity. The foreclosures are a whole different thing too.
Yeah, the major in the divisions in the state's attorney's office.
Right,
is,
civil and criminal.
Criminal, so civil and criminal. So you didn't work very much in those cases.
Never on those sides. I was always, if I took a criminal case, I would be for the defense.
Okay.
Yes, I had probably 500 jury trials in Waukegan and Milwaukee, which is a lot, and maybe 5,000 divorces.
That's when I mentioned that you are a special person, you're an elite person, you're an exemplary person, because very few people will operate pro bono, you know. And what encouraged you to just do pro bono work? Because of the need? You saw that?
Well, it wasn't entirely pro bono. I wouldn't have survived at all. But
Okay.
my Social Security is relatively very small because of that.
Okay.
But I was semi pro bono, and if you would be surprised, I actually had 3 millionaire clients who they came to me because I would be reasonable for even their purposes.
Okay. Okay. I'm wondering about. We have a state's attorney's office, and then we have the public defender's office. Did you recognize many attorneys that were willing to work in a public defender's office, you know, defending clients?
No, in general, that was just a way to get their feet wet. So they would come, and maybe if they had connections, they could be in the state's attorney's office or the public defender's office and get their experience in mostly plea bargains, but maybe a few trials at the expense of the state, because that's a paycheck for both the public defender and the state's attorneys. But I was older because I had already practiced 5 years in Chicago and 5 years in Milwaukee, and I was going to be a sole practitioner. I find being your own boss pays. You always get along with that person.
I'm wondering why prisons 80% at least on African Americans, Latinos, and so forth. And you mentioned something that caught my ear about plea bargaining. Do you think that they would plea bargain more because they didn't have the funds to get a private lawyer?
Exactly. If they had the resources to fight the case, this is why there are so many innocent people have been convicted, because the evidence is stacked against them, and they're convinced by some public defender or just go along, get along to keep the cases moving.
Then also, what about your opinion, or you have any comments about privatization of prisons?
Oh, I think it's awful. It's much like the charter schools. The only reason is for money making of the investors, and it actually causes the judges to impose more sentences so there be more benefit for their they all have to run for office, and somebody has to contribute to them, and it's one whole money-making system. There's no reason in the world why the United States should incarcerate more people than anybody else, including Red China and Russia, in the world.
Wow.
We do, per capita, and on a strictly racist basis. It has nothing to do with there's more crime in the black community. It has to do with absolute, just plain racism.
It's not that African Americans commit more crimes.
Well, that's what they're justifying it as, but it's just
what is
simply not true.
What is racism, you know? Your opinion.
We're seeing it in a really bad light in the headlines every day. Take the percentage of black suspects who are simply stopped on a traffic violation, like a light being out, and they end up dead. I mean, in my opinion, there have always been too many trigger-happy cops, but those things don't generally, or didn't used to make the newspapers. They were happening right here in Lake County. Guy shot in the back in the alley, right and left, but you didn't read about it because they were all covered up.
Yeah, we read about in what happened in Chicago is a big factor that's bringing a lot of this out. A big factor is jury duty. What's the importance of jury duty?
Everyone should answer the call. They have to. They'll send a warrant out if you don't.
Okay.
But I think the old system that did not permit judges and attorneys to be on the jury was better, because none of them can be independent at all. I wouldn't want one on my jury if I picked it. The best kind of jury you can get if you want a fair trial is a spread of opinions of, and they're taken from the voting lists,
Okay.
but when the jury commission sends some people to a courtroom and all of them are picked from Lake Bluff, you can be pretty sure they're going to be all white jury. It's just not fair, that part of it.
Now, the attorney could select a jury, but it could be contested by the opposing attorney too, though, right?
There's not a lot of opportunity. The jurors come in like 36 at a time,
Okay.
and they come in whatever they are, and they're called at random, 12 into the box, and
Okay.
then they're questioned in panels of 4, and you have so many strikes depending on the severity of the case. If it's felony, you get more strikes. If it's a misdemeanor, you don't. But the prosecutor exercises the first strike and then the defense, and you go back and forth. And if you see, in the old days and even now, they're going to knock all the blacks or minorities off of there with every strike they have.
Wow.
Because they're considered to be more likely to vote not guilty. They're going to consider the facts. They're going to look at everything and then make a decision. They're not going to have a predisposition that everyone is guilty. That's how they set it up. In Wisconsin, they have an instruction that a police officer, you understand, is not any more credible than anyone else. They don't have that in Illinois. In Wisconsin, they have an instruction said, falsus et uno. If you hear any witness lie on any subject, you have the right to believe that he or she may lie on everything.
Okay.
Not in Illinois. Illinois is pretty rough on defendants.
You know, you mentioned about divorce cases. You worked on a lot of divorce cases, but tell us, why is there such a rise in divorce cases now?
Well, that's a real philosophical question. I suppose the no-fault divorce is the reason. It was more difficult to get a divorce in the old days when you had so many grounds, and even then, if you really wanted to get a divorce, you could. Now it's much easier. You don't have to have any reason, and it's everything down the middle, theoretically.
You know, we have a few landmark cases. I say a few, but there are many, but dealing with racism and segregation. 1896, I guess the Dred versus Scott decision, you know, was a landmark decision. And tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
separate but equal.
Yeah, well, in Dred Scott, he was considered to be only 5/8 of a person, not a real person, and so on. So they were allowed to discriminate against him. Plessy versus Ferguson was a separate but equal educational decision, and it was overturned by Brown versus the Board of Education in I think 1968, wasn't it?
1954.
54, right. It was Miranda and the others came in 68.
You're like I say, very astute attorney, and your memory's a little better than mine.
No, I'm going to be 80 in September. Trust me.
Congratulations. You know, 3 things get away from you. The first thing to go is the memory. I don't remember the other 2.
Good point.
Dred Scott was a slave actually trying to get his freedom.
Yes.
This is what that was.
And he had no standing because he wasn't a person, a citizen.
Right. And separate but equal, like Plessy versus Ferguson, you know, separate but equal. And it took, gee whiz, look how long it took. Once a Supreme Court makes a decision, it took 50 years, I guess, you know, until 1954 to change it, you know. It's amazing because I think the decision was 9-0 to change it, and I don't think that ever happened before the Supreme Court decision. Now it's always 5-4, you know, or something 5-3, this type of thing.
Well, that only proved it was timely. Finally.
Right. This is fantastic. One nation under God with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
What does that mean to you?
Well,
Well, I gotta know what it says, but it's interpreted different by different people in different ways, you know.
well, like George Orwell said in his book 1984, some people are more equal than others, right? And Animal Farm.
But under God, we're
Dwight Eisenhower added the under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. It wasn't there until 1952, I think it was.
okay, okay,
But
okay.
it's gone through a lot of changes too.
Yeah. One slogan that's been coined all over: all lives matter. You know, because of the shootings and so forth, the Black Lives Matter, and
Right.
then
That came first, and then they had the Blue Lives Matter. So
okay.
I think they combined it to just say all lives matter, which is, of course.
And this is true, you know. If all lives matter, then we wouldn't need.
If all lives mattered, we wouldn't have any abortions, would we?
Okay.
They don't,
Okay.
even then.
Right. You know, we have money, I guess, is behind. You know, I tell everybody I have never seen a Brinks truck behind a hearse yet. You know, but money is because even the slave matter is all based on money, right?
Money makes the world go around.
Right. Slaves built the White House, and now you know, who's looking to occupy the house, you know.
That was part of Michelle's speech, right?
Right, this type of thing. Well, tell us about, we talked about the women in the legal profession, and you mentioned, and there's still more women in the legal profession, probably just as many as men now, right? I wonder.
And there are more proliferation now, yes, of course. But they're very few in the trial arena. Very few actually doing jury trials. You've got them doing briefs, and you've always had them doing the administrative tasks and the motions and so on, but the males usually dominate the trial work.
Equal protection under the law. But you enlighten us on what does that mean to you?
It's supposed to be on every level, of course, and it's suffered a lot over the decades, but I think Martin Luther King would turn over in his grave if he saw how far it's turned back again. It was better. There was some affirmative action, and actually things did get better, and now suddenly with the conservative Supreme Court, they're starting to allow the schools to cut back and not have any affirmative action, and it just sort of takes the initiative out of the persons who could have been doctors, who could have been lawyers.
Let's talk about some of the highlights of your legal career. I know you have a million of them there, you know.
Well,
but just share some with us. Yeah.
One of my best trials was when Carlin Stone was accused of strong arm robbery of the Night Moves waterbed place on Grand, and he went in there several times and talked to the I guess he was the brother-in-law of the owner, and he asked him for a loan, about $60 or something, and every time the guy would say, "Oh no, I can't loan you any money," and he'd come back several times, and then he gave him the $60, and he wrote out an IOU, put his name, address, everything on it, and left. And they put charges on him anyway. And when the witness came to court, he has this huge raggedy Bible in his hand, and he's like he's really did this. And Carlin Stone just told it like it was, and the jury found him to be not guilty. Who leaves their name, address, phone number, and an IOU if they're robbing the place? And it was just a strictly black and white situation where this guy was also so supposedly religious and felt apprehensive. He felt that he was being imposed upon. He didn't really want to loan him the $60, whatever it was. That was kind of, it made the front page because it was so interesting. I did one trial in Milwaukee where the guy was accused of sawing the bars in the jail, but at trial, it was proven that everybody on the tier took a turn of sawing at that same bar. And they had headlines when he first went on trial of he sawed and sawed and sawed again. But then when we actually went to trial, and I said to the jury, how do you know which of any of these people actually went through or intended to escape from the jail? And they acquitted him. They just simply couldn't prove it, but they were intent to prosecute.
Beyond a reasonable doubt, that has really has got a lot of people confused.
Right.
What is beyond a reasonable doubt?
Well, in a civil case, you just have 51%, so all you have to prove your case by. In a criminal case, it's a heavier burden, and some laymen think it's beyond a shadow of a doubt. You have to just pinpoint every single thing, and of course it's not that. Only reasonable doubts. And if you've ever seen 12 Angry Men where Henry Fonda and the whole jury are arguing and arguing, or any Perry Mason case that went to jury and they argued, you see that there can be differing opinions. No two witnesses see the same thing the same way. In fact, there's a famous test in almost every law school where the professor will set it up where two guys come through and they don't actually have a gun. One, he's got a banana in his hand, and he comes through and he says bang bang, and they go on, and every single individual in the audience has a different idea of whether he had a gun or didn't he have a gun. Because it goes so fast and you just can't see all the details. It's all from different perspectives. That's why eyewitness testimony is not very reliable. Really better if there is some actual, you know, gunpowder on your hands, DNA in the process, that's the best. There's a case in Illinois, one of the first things you get in criminal law, called Miller versus Pate, where the actual evidence was red paint, but the prosecution and the cops all said it was blood because it was barn paint. It could have been blood. They didn't do any analysis. They had no scientific test. That's a very old case. But the guy was convicted of a capital case. It was a murder case, went all the way up. And some of these people being exonerated by the DNA were obviously framed in the first place, or they wouldn't have been convicted. And the difficulty with framing the wrong person is that the perp gets away, and he's committing other crimes, like that one in Zion that got away. And
what about the two girls?
Yeah, the two girls. He alleged the stepfather was accused at first and sat in jail for 5 years, while the real perp, whose DNA was critical, went on to enlist in the Army and go over in the East Coast and commit capital crimes here and there. There were, I think, a couple of nurses or something that he killed and others he raped, and he just, every time you frame the wrong person, the real purpose out there doing what he started to do and more.
So the DNA analysis that they started using played a great part then in solving cases.
Oh, and all the forensic television wouldn't be there without it. We're all interested in the law and order and the CSI and all that. It's good.
What about the Oj Simpson case? Was that, I guess the DNA played a great part in that one too.
It did. And what was it, Furman? I'm one of the few people who is still keeping an open mind as to whether OJ did that or not, because the jury said he didn't. And the EDTA, the preservative, was in the blood on the post. So obviously it was planted.
No doubt about it. Huh?
And of course Johnny Cochran's famous, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Right.
They made a mistake in making him try it on. But
so this had been going on And that's when you saw so many people appear to be rejoicing because they say justice has prevailed because it's been happening so many times in the police department. You know, the King case, for example. You know, and
they just had a case in Kenosha where the officer planted an ID and fingerprints in a capital case, and when it came time to actually testify to this, he did the better thing. Apparently, he consulted counsel and he retracted it and let them know that he had planted it, and they prosecuted him for that and he got a tap on the hands. I don't think he even got any jail time. He was just reprimanded or something. But that's just the tip of the iceberg as to how many cops ever do that. Alan Dershowitz wrote an entire book on testifying.
Okay.
And they love to back up a bad bust. They will, no matter what. Clear the books if they can, and that has a very good effect on an officer's rating, his personal ratings, and he'll get to be detective faster or whatever progress he might make, but it doesn't necessarily result in justice.
How has Waukegan changed from the time you first got here up until now?
Well, the riots were in 1967, right before we came, so it was...
Yeah, I think the mayor was Robert Sabanjan.
Okay.
In that game, yeah, right. But 67, 68.
Right, and I got along fine with Robert Sabanjan, the old mayor. He had an open door policy. You could go see him anytime you wanted to, and he would come talk at the church, and he was very affable. And he plowed the sidewalks. He got some things done.
Matter of fact, he was
haven't been done since.
Is that right? Right across the street from. You know the same street that was?
Oh, yes. His old house was kitty corner from 555 McAllister, but by that time he had moved to the north side of Waukegan, I think.
So being a former attorney now, you feel like you may like to. You're happy that you're out of it? You feel like you like to be in it still?
I'm too old to consider anything like that anymore, but at the time. In 1984, when I was no longer practicing, I was up to 400 pounds. I couldn't move.
400 pounds?
I couldn't move. I needed double hip and double knee replacements, which I've since got.
Okay.
And my first orthopedist wouldn't do the first hip replacement until I lost at least 100 pounds. So I lost 120 pounds in 11 months with no exercise, just diet.
Wow. And
no bariatric surgery, just diet.
Okay.
And then I've been losing ever since. So this is the year I'm going down to normal. I'm at 160 pounds now, and I intend to get to maybe 150, 140.
Well, you have a close friend of yours, a world traveler, singer, Mary Lacey. And
Dr. Mary Lacey.
Dr. Mary Lacey now. She had a similar problem, too, but weight problem, right?
Yes. Yes, she's been through a lot, and she's been ill quite a bit, and in and out of the hospital from health problems as well as a severe automobile accident, which complicated everything.
That's right. Like when it rains, it pours, huh?
Yep.
She had quite an accomplishment. She talks about the former White House First Lady, Betty Ford, that she invited, and she came to her home.
In 1976, she was here.
And
Mary Lacey has been helping the homeless for over 40 years. She has the Mary's Mission now, of course, on the south side of Martin Luther King Drive, but she sang in the White House 4 times. And
4 times in the White House.
International travel when her son was stationed in Stuttgart.
What is he, a major? A major?
I believe he's a retired major now.
Yeah, right. So that was quite an accomplishment there, you know. It's good to know a lot of people, you know.
And she has the annual parade for the mission on Christmas every.
So she's still working with the mission.
Well.
Yeah. This is fun. Have you thought about being a community activist and like she's doing? Or?
I don't like the public
Okay.
light very much anymore. I just do what I can to do the good that I can do, which is all now very third degree.
Okay. Do you still assist when you can in legal problems?
Yes, I just
do?
got a little teeny office now. It's going to be mostly arts and crafts, and I named it Pro Bono, thank God, because I got 3 typewriters in there, and people who want to do their own legal work are welcome to do that as well. But I'll be helping them with the diet regimen. I'm going to have a youth chess group. I do think that's important for youth to learn how to play chess very well before they turn 12. Oh. You have to learn a foreign language, learn a musical instrument, get your math in your head or it won't be there, and play chess.
That's interesting.
Before you're 12.
Very interesting, you know, because I don't know how many, well, the chess is the #1 game now, you know, but...
It pretty much has been for hundreds of years. Of course, the Queen's only 500 years old.
Okay, what about voting and voting rights? The importance of voting and also voting rights.
It gets more important every year, I think, and they had the rock the vote and all the difference. And of course, President Obama would not be there if the vote didn't get out. So. Okay. I think it's the millennials have registered to vote. We just don't know which way they might be going. It's an interesting development.
And I think in President Bush, I think he, the Supreme Court had made a decision, stopped the voting in Miami and so forth, and Al Gore, I guess, was the one that claimed that he lost the election because the Supreme Court said stop. And that was kind of odd. You know, we try to encourage people to vote, and even our Supreme Court says stop the voting.
Well, that was an anomaly, and there were the tabs or something that were confusing, and that right. People meant to vote Democratic and instead couldn't because of something in there. That you know, it's a matter of opinion, but I think it would not hurt to have the popular vote decide every election. This electoral college stuff had its day, and sometimes the wrong people, way back to Aaron Burr and all of those electoral colleges skewed things. Why wouldn't it be the popular vote, period, everywhere?
Right.
In my opinion. I mean, I'm not making the laws, and you'd have to change the Constitution to do that.
Yeah, okay, that's the key. That's the key. Yeah,
but if it's going to be fair, it should be fair.
Yeah. Well, we have a representative government, and we couldn't have everybody going to Congress.
No, everybody luckily wouldn't want to. I sure wouldn't. I wouldn't want to be in the president's office either.
So we have a representative government, and we pray that the representatives will vote the way we want them to vote, you know, this kind of thing.
Or just reasonably protect us like they're supposed to, right?
Right. What did you say you was raised up on the chicken farm? Or what determined that you was going to leave the chicken farm and do better things?
My father was Jewish and my mother was a Scotch Lutheran, and they were all very short people. Oh. But I got my Scottish grandfather's height, so I passed my father in the 6th grade in height and weight by 4 inches. And my very Jewish grandmother taught me to read and write at 3 and encouraged me all through my education to just I went to kindergarten at 4. Graduated early from high school, went to college. Academic life was it, but very hard work ethic. When you're on a chicken farm, you're up at 5 every day, and at 8 years old, actually less than that, I was shooting the sparrows off of the fence with my own air rifle. Okay. And it was a Benjamin repeater, not the lousy Daisy air rifle the guys had with a one-shot.
Right, right.
You can't let those sparrows get your chicken feed. It was precious during the war.
Right. You know, the chicken farms are still popular. I have a relative in Mississippi that works on a chicken farm right now. You know, and the chicken never touched the ground with all the light, you know.
Well, ours were more like what they call range because we had a big area. And my dad grew his own alfalfa and had a hammer mill that he pounded it into chicken feed, and then you buy the supplemental feed. In those days, it was put in colorful bags. Chicken feed bags were like pillow ticking with little roses on it, and my mother would make my blouses out of those. Everybody knew I was wearing the chicken feed clothes.
Right. You know, you have quite a background because you mentioned that in addition to the chicken farms, did you work in making bombs?
Oh, my father was a tool and die maker, so he made bombs during the war. He was just a little bit too old for the draft and had 2 children, and we all moved down to Burlington before the war. That was 1940. We moved to Burlington, Iowa, and they were bathtubs of nitro side by side in concrete bunkers, and he was making $500 a week when the average Rosie the Riveter and factory workers were lucky to make $100 or $150 a week. But it was very dangerous work, and he worked there. On the 4th year, he worked. The woman in the cubicle next to him blew herself up.
Oh my goodness!
That was why they had the individual, and he was able to buy the chicken farm the 2nd year, 10-acre farm in Moline, Illinois, which is, 50 miles, maybe a little further from Burlington, Iowa. And when we went to the movies every Saturday, it was the first time any of us had sat in a segregated movie. We sat down in the back of the movie. You can't sit there. That's the black section. You have to either go further front or go to the balcony.
And what year was that?
That would have been 1940.
Okay.
Burlington, Iowa was not that far south either.
Right. Oh boy, and that's when you're citing history, because if you don't know your history, then there's subject to repeat it if you don't cause change, you know. Right. Well,
we've both seen a lot of change, but.
I remember I used to go south every other year with my aunt, and the trains from East St. Louis to, when they get to Carbondale, we have to change, move to the back of, change coaches, you know.
Oh my.
Couldn't ride on the same coach going into the south, you know. And those things you just never forget, you know.
I know Cairo, Illinois was segregated.
Yeah.
The very toe, the bottom of Illinois.
Right. Well, tell me this, you mentioned you still have typewriters, right?
Yes. Well, one manual and 3 electric.
and a computer?
I have the computer, but I use it as a word processor. I'm reluctant to go online. I'm a Luddite. My son graduated from University of Iowa in 2005 with a computer science degree, and he's still angry that I won't let him put me online. I said, no. Yeah. He gave me an email, an address one time many years ago, and I would get all these emails and ads that you don't want. I'm deleting 700 a month or something. I said, no, I don't want this. So.
So you went through preparation of briefs and so forth with your typewriter?
We did, sure.
Okay.
Just like the theses and everything for PhDs were typed in those days.
Right.
The computers were invented the year I left college, about, what was it, 1960? Okay. And I went to Northwestern for N60, so Iliac took up 2 rooms in those. They had those punch card things.
You know, the legal profession was an exciting career for you then, right? You have no regrets.
Not really.
And
It was
the primary was in, you say, divorce cases, and I mean, they weren't
the
criminal.
trial work is more challenging,
Okay.
but the divorce cases are a necessity, and once in a blue moon you get a divorce case that you don't really want, but they fight to the bitter end.
Mm-hmm.
And the one most interesting was this very old couple had every bit of their possessions. They made 5-6 pages of lists, and they couldn't decide on who wanted what. So the judge just says, well, number them all, and we will flip a coin, and one of you is going to get the odd, and one of you will get the even.
Okay.
And they were even fighting over an old torn-eared teddy bear. And that's how the property thing was decided, just by sheer random. They couldn't set it up because they didn't know if they were going to get odd or even.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned siblings, so you know, how many siblings that you have?
I have a brother and sister, both younger than I.
Okay, okay. And children, you have?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have 4 children,
Okay.
2 girls from my first marriage, and then 10 years later, 2 boys from my black husband. And I have 13 grandchildren, and probably the great-grands keep multiplying so fast I can't quite keep track of them, but
Okay.
I think there are about a dozen of them out there right now.
And the black husband you had was from Milwaukee or Waukegan?
He was born in Milwaukee, and then we came to
Oh,
Waukegan.
okay, okay, okay. You have had a very and you were talented academically too, right? Because you had double majors in college, right?
Right. Well, I had to work my way through, so that's challenging enough.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, what's new on the horizon then for you? You're 80, but you still have an outlook there that.
Well, it's always good to encourage the youth, and education is the solution to poverty. It really is.
Okay, okay.
So I think the millennials need to get their nose out of these little games and looking for Pokemon and get back to some real books.
What's going to cause that? You know, we have the youth. They have to be encouraged by parents. And what is it going to take to get the parents involved in working with the youth?
That's always been the $64,000 question, and you know it's cyclical. It comes and it goes, and it's. I think preschool education is important. I think the Head Start programs were all good. My own children, I made sure they had preschool. I paid more for the Montessori education for my daughters than I did for my own college.
Mm-hmm.
They had that in Wisconsin when we were up there. And then my boys went to Happy Day Nursery in Waukegan. Mrs. Thomas ran a very strict school.
Oh, yes. So what about Miss Thomas? Now, you know, every person has a season. And Mrs. Thomas had her season, and an outstanding season, all of her life. I guess maybe 40 years or something like that.
She was an amazing individual, and apparently quite early in her profession, some child had been given a balloon and inverted it, and it got stuck in the throat, and before there could even be any CPR, he or she died. So she banned balloons forever. Okay. And all, you know, that's the first thing some of the party people think of, but I thought that was very educational and it makes you think. You don't give a kid those little marshmallows, it could stick there and not get out of the windpipe, and the same with those little hot dogs and different things. Just be more sensible with the kids.
On the South Side, you mentioned some memorable people. You mentioned Miss Thomas, and there's a Dr. King. Were you familiar with him too?
No, I really didn't know.
Okay, on the South. But what are some of the other that ones that you care to mention that were role models on the South Side?
Chauncey and Marcia Streeter were deacons in my church, and they were my first and best friends forever. Marcia just died at the age of 90.
Right, right.
And she was probably my very best friend for decades.
Right, right. So you started early, and what you mentioned, you went to college about 17? You mentioned.
Yes.
17, and scholarships.
I had to have scholarships. My father gave me a manual Smith Corona portable typewriter for graduation from high school in 1954, and said, "Now, get yourself a husband to support you like your mother did." He made it clear he was not going to help me one iota, and he never did.
And you never lived in condos and so forth. You were in trailers. You mentioned about tell about the trailer experience.
Oh, well, during the war, it was a trailer in Burlington. It was government housing that we were living in then. And when we bought the 10-acre farm, there was just like there wasn't even indoor plumbing.
Okay.
He put a temporary trailer there as he finished the house, and the outhouse. He ran a wire from the house to the outhouse, a very sturdy laundry wire, and he could kill 100 chickens in less than a minute and lose less blood. You don't chop them on the head and let them lose 4 or 5 ounces of blood.
Okay.
He would tie them all up from their feet, and he'd go take an ice pick through the brain of the chicken. Boom, 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 boom. We timed him. Less than a minute, he'd get all 100 chickens.
Oh, my goodness.
In that way, they sold them with the heads on, and they weighed more.
Wow.
During the war, you could evade the ration stamps in that fashion.
Wow. You still have family reunions here with your youngsters? They still, are they in the nearby area?
My 2 sons are in Iowa, and my daughter's down in Missouri, and I have 1 daughter left in the state. She's in Winthrop Harbor. That's where we usually converge.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much again for taking time for your busy schedule to talk about your career. It's especially when it's you from the outhouse to the White House. That's when my wife talks about the outhouse to the White House. She was raised in Natchez, Mississippi, and what had outhouses, and then she's recognized for the work that she's doing in North Chicago now. I don't know how the president found out about what she's doing here, but you know, they got recommendations and so forth, you know. So she was invited to the White House where she received the presidential medal,
Commendations and so on.
Civilian.
I think her appearances on Oprah helped a lot.
Oh, yes. Okay. Right. That was before.
And, of course, her work.
That she's doing. Right. This type of thing. So she wrote some memoirs, a book called From the Outhouse to the White House. So when you mention that, I reflect about what she talked about, too. So you're happy to, you guys have some good conversations there, you know, this type of thing. You know. So it's been great hearing the highlights of your career and knowing that. And you mentioned that legal, you're not doing legal work now then?
No. I'm too old for that.
You've had enough. So
I encourage them to get into the books and do it themselves if they can't afford to pay that for $500 an hour or whatever they're charging now.
Oh my goodness, yeah, you know. What's the criteria for youngsters in high school they should take to if they want to go into legal profession? I know writing and reading, they do a lot of reading and so forth. But
yes, I think texting has ruined everyone's spelling abilities.
Okay.
And then the self-correcting computers, they don't have to spell. It's important to be able to...
Speaking, I guess, is
right.
is important too.
Communication's always been important, right?
Yeah, probably in any field, but especially in legal literature. You know?
Right, and there's a legal education just teaches you to think more and know which books to go to. Nobody knows it all.
Right.
They can't.
Right. Well, it's been great again having you here and to let Lake County know
Thank you
about
for having me.
about what a exemplary person that you are, and maybe it would encourage someone else, because we do need legal attorneys here in this area. As a matter of fact, we have just only a few. I think our state's attorney's office have maybe 4 or 5, and the public defender's office maybe one or 2.
Well,
So especially African American attorneys, right? And I mentioned about the public defender's office, since you have mostly minorities that cannot afford a private attorney, then and they would like to see a role model.
of course they would.
When they go to
You're
see.
right. There's so few. It's been tokenism for decades, and it still is.
So you don't know the solution that well, improve our school system, I guess, mainly. You mentioned something about charter school. You think charter schools would be the answer?
I'm not sure they're the answer. I think the privatization of education is not good either, not in any levels, I don't think.
Okay.
That's just a personal opinion. I did act as a substitute teacher for
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with former attorney Alyce Neff Browne. She's from Clinton, Iowa, and through Milwaukee, and then end up here now in Waukegan, Illinois. And I want to give a special shout out for Lorna Gully. She's an avid listener to and a viewer of Community Forum. And I want to thank you, Lorna Gully, for continually viewing Community Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Community Forum. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host.
Thank you.